Realization does turn everything on its head. Awakening, non-duality, whatever you want to call it. It reveals to us that the ways we had been perceiving reality was essentially backward, or something like looking through a mirror. If you could imagine holding up a hand mirror in front of your face, seeing behind yourself, and then trying to maneuver what looks like going forward in the mirror, but your whole body's going backwards and all of your actions are reversed. So turning left is turning right is turning left, and so forth. How awkward and strange that would be. And then all of a sudden to just let the hand mirror loose, let go of it, and to see what's right in front of your face, to see how things can be so simple and straightforward and fluid and effortless. That's what I'm talking about. That's the realization that I never was separate. There never was a formed separate entity moving through time. That these thoughts about separation and near and far and up and down and past and future are just that. They're thoughts, they're aberrations. They don't actually exist in the quote unquote real world. To suddenly have all of that dispelled, it changes everything. And it does turn a lot on its head. I was reading a comment that said they'd heard me say at times that in the end, it's seen that suffering doesn't actually exist. And that was very confusing. And yet, at some point, they realized that what I was saying is true. But this is, again, everything being turned on its head. Early on, as you've heard me say, before we have much insight at all into the nature of ourselves, and even to the possibility of accessing the nature of ourselves, we often don't even realize we suffer. Our suffering is so hidden from us that it actually takes some measure of encountering the absolute or the dharma, let's say, before we start to even recognize how much we actually are suffering. And then starts the journey of awakening, right? Crossing the threshold, going out, exploring all of the twists and turns and pitfalls of identity, and getting to the real crux of the whole thing, and then shattering the illusion of separate self, and then coming back. And as we take that journey, we encounter suffering in so many forms, at so many levels, and it can be excruciating at times. It can seem insurmountable. It's not all the time, but it definitely will be prominent in your experience at times. So when you're there, it seems like, how could there not be suffering? And then at some point, the apparatus of self is so dismantled, and then the tendencies of clinging become elucidated, and the resistance around these begins to settle, and the energetic restlessness begins to settle. And then we actually do see that suffering isn't what we thought it was at all, not even close. In fact, we see that it was our best friend. It was the, albeit uncomfortable, visitor knocking on the door, telling us, you need to open the door, you need to see what's going on out here, right? And without that, we wouldn't have had the realization, we wouldn't have had the shift. So we have a very different relationship with suffering. And then things become so integrated that it's hard to pick apart, self from other, inside from outside, before from after, and then ultimately enlightened from unenlightened, and suffering from extinction, nirvana, cessation. So things do come full circle, but in a very fortuitous way. There are a lot of other aspects of life that end up turned on their head when it comes to this process. But I think that's probably the biggest one, is our whole relationship with suffering and all of the twists and turns that relationship undergoes, and how beautifully orchestrated this whole thing is. We couldn't plan this out. There's no way. There's just no way. We wouldn't, even if we could plan it out and we knew what was coming, we wouldn't do it. It'd be too painful. But there's something that leads us along the whole way. I'm not going to give it a name, but a lot of people call it the Dharma. I sometimes say living truth, but it doesn't need a name. It's instinct. It's where your instinct touches the totally impersonal, where the relative aspect of you touches the absolute aspect of what couldn't be you or other or self or form or formlessness. There's magic there. So take the journey, investigate. Don't try to understand ahead of time. Don't try to figure this out. It's not in your favor to try to figure this out. It's not at all in your favor to try to figure this out. None of it. I think some people hear that and they still try to figure it out. Don't try to figure it out. This is not about figuring it out. It's not about understanding it ahead of time, because by understanding it ahead of time, or by trying to understand it ahead of time, you're actually hesitating without realizing it. If you want to feel like you have something, if you need to do something to exert that sense of control, don't exert it through mind and knowledge. Use it to pray. Use it to make an intention that goes beyond yourself. Meaning, I don't know where this goes. I can't know where this goes. And my instinct tells me that, but I'm willing to go, even if I'm pulled and dragged, kicking and screaming. I'm willing to go. That's a prayer. Don't make it until you're ready, because it's very powerful. But it does work.